Hi, my name is Trevor New, and I'm a violist. When I was 9 years old, I saw an orchestra play at my elementary school. They played Adagio for strings. I thought it was probably one of the most unbelievable things that I had heard. I was really into choir music, but I hadn't heard a chamber string orchestra like that before. So when they asked, does anybody want to play in the orchestra? I thought, well, yeah, I have a stringed instrument at home. I play guitar. So I asked them, can I play guitar? And when they said no, I went with the viola, which is actually Jimi Hendrix's first instrument, who was kind of like an idol for me. I ended up going to the shop. I had an option to try out a lot of the different instruments. Henry Strobel was a big figure in our town. He wasn't just a person who provided instruments. He was a huge supporter of music in the entire state, and particularly our town. Anybody who was a young kid learning to play a stringed instrument went to him. He gave them a chance to be a part of this huge musical community. I played all the way up through high school without having a lot of musical intentions or focus, just essentially having fun with it and having fun creating, until I went to this camp called Meadowmount. And going there, I got to really be a part of all these stories that I heard growing up, hearing that from students and teachers. My teacher, for example, studied with another teacher who studied with Ivan Galamian. If anybody's ever been to Meadowmount, there are some pretty unbelievable players there. I made a lot of friends. Now I play with them as colleagues. I'm the artistic director of En.J.inn Arts, which is environment, justice, innovation in the arts. One of the things that we do is take a group of students and we ask them to create a new piece of music. What's nice about this is that we can use these tools that are already in classical music that they've been practicing. You have your scales, your arpeggios, even the melodies and motifs and things from the pieces that they're working on. And then through asking them to connect that to their own intentions, they're able to deepen their experience with that piece of music and then also with their instrument, and hopefully it also allows them to relate to the audience in a different way. Less like this and more like we're doing this together. One of the really fun things that we do is use hybrid performance as this method of exploring timing and collaboration with new members of an orchestra, let's say. What we'll do is we'll have a youth ensemble playing in one location. I'll work with them for a little bit, we'll explore improvisation, and then far, far away, sometimes I have a particular collaborator I like to work with, Gaurav Chatterjee in India. He'll beam in through the internet and we'll make some music together, often starting off with a little drum beat that just seems to appear out of nowhere, and then we'll project him up on the screen. And this is something that we do with different youth ensembles. We have a really interesting video with Bentonville Youth Ensemble in Arkansas, where Gabu pops up on the screen, and they've been playing with him for the last 10 minutes, actually. And they're completely unaware of it. And he's literally on the opposite side of the world. What it does is it really speaks to this idea that the musical sense is something that goes beyond just simply counting 1, 2, 3, 4. There's all these things that happen in between, and this actual kinesthetic sense that we all have as musicians and really as people. When I kind of decided to pursue the viola more professionally, more intensely, it didn't necessarily come from a place of wanting to achieve something. It was something that I just had kind of felt in some way. I always felt like I had like a sensitivity to sound. My parents are both educators, but they really appreciate music and they really appreciate the value that it brings to our experience in life. We listen to a lot of rock, a lot of folk, and then a lot of, upbeat 80s music, Whitney Houston, a lot of Peter Gabriel, Eric Clapton. I was kind of surrounded by music growing up without really realizing it. I sang all the time growing up. I explored different sounds, like if I was playing with action figures or something like that, I was acutely aware of what was happening sonically. I would say somebody like Robin Williams was my favorite actor growing up because he was so all over the place, and he would take this sort of cacophony and channel it into storytelling. Like seeing him in Hook, for example, which is actually my favorite movie, by the way. You have this amazing scoring with John Williams, and then you have Robin Williams, who's this amazing actor in the sense of taking a serious moment and then stretching and kind of pushing it, and then going right into something that's really fun and completely goofy, but having those things so perfectly tie together. Like that movie is about the life cycle and dreams, longing and loss and things, putting this idea of that where there's an end, there's this beginning. And I always saw music as this great vehicle to experience that. I experienced that in that movie and so many other movies, and I would say it was also a great inspiration, hearing and actually playing along with film scores. I'd often have my viola out. I'd be plucking different notes, watching whatever movie I put on. It was like The Lion King or like Lord of the Rings or something like that. Just kind of playing those tunes and ingraining the melody, but then also this backdrop of rhythm and texture, usually kind of pausing for these dramatic moments. One of the pieces that can make performance challenging is the idea of risk and reward. Essentially, if you experiment on stage and you mess up, maybe you learn something. But at the same time, what's reflected is, okay, that's subpar, that's not going to be as good. When exploring that myself, I try to incorporate some of that even into my music. I think early experiments that I did, my approach would be write something out, keep it pretty loose, and then I would force myself to connect different pieces together, different motifs, different melodies. Even in some cases, if I was really looking for a challenge, I would plan no program at all. Usually this is for house concerts, to kind of force myself to think creatively in front of an audience. Because what can often happen is you get in front of a bunch of people and then you revert back to your scaffolding rather than kind of filling in these spaces that we often find to be the special part of a musical piece or a performance. Yeah, something that was really exciting for me was experimenting with hybrid performance. When I think of making like a musical piece or putting together a performance, I often want to create an opportunity for the audience to hear something new, but then also hear and see something, from themselves in what's being performed. So collaboration is like that, but it adds this extra perspective. Everybody has an important perspective, everybody has a different perspective. When you combine that with what you're trying to do and that energy is there, you can make something that you would never create by yourself. That old saying, it's, greater than the sum of two parts. Myself in person with either an orchestra or actually solo, and then having a number of people in different locations beaming in and playing music together. While that sounds really complicated, the nice thing is when I'm using technology, I'm trying to use it as a pathway or a way to connect versus control. So that control and that playing that we end up doing actually comes from everybody's ability to play together, and really everybody's interest to play together as well. It can test your levels of collaboration, whether you have like a solid connection, how well is your technology working, how well are your tools working, and in overcoming that, you usually end up discovering even something more interesting, playing with the difficulty. Actually, I believe Michael Caine says that, use the difficulty. Currently, there's an amazing opportunity to have my work published by Boosie and Hawkes, and working with Sphinx and the American Composers Orchestra. I was a part of the Earshot Collaboratory program where I spent, I believe it was about a year and a half actually developing a number of techniques to play with an orchestra and have a number of soloists beaming in to play together, as well as even other orchestras playing with orchestras. This was something that has been a really long and interesting road and is kind of all connecting to this space where my piece is being published. We're working on different educational programming for that as well, and instructional materials for people to use as a part of the pieces. So this is my viola. It's made by William Robert Scott in, was it the year 2000? I've had this instrument for now quite over a decade. Really enjoyed playing it. He won the international making competition for violas actually the year after I got it, so it's pretty lucky. I have a tuner attaches on the side. It has a rubber padding here, so it keeps the instrument nice and safe. A Schertler Stat V pickup, sentimental shoulder rest here that I've had for many years, probably since high school, I think it is. I've played on it for many different competitions and big performances, and it's a Kuhn shoulder rest. I'm using some Adagio strings right here, Kaplan Forzas. I've really been enjoying playing on them. My work kind of takes me in a lot of different places, so I have to play both plugged in and unplugged, very loud or very quietly. I find that I don't really have to think about that too much. Before, I would have this issue where there'd be a tremendous amount of surface noise, which is something that I'm very sensitive to. And with these, I don't really experience that. When I'm plugged in, I'm able to play and in a lot of cases actually use the recorded outcome from that as the main piece in something that I'm working on, like in a session or something like that. When I first got to the city, I had a lot of goals for my playing, wanting to be published and make an album and take advantage of all these different opportunities that are available. Fortunately, I've been able to be a part of and produce, play all sorts of projects that I had always wanted to. I think my goals and intentions have actually expanded in a way. Some of it's more experimental, and then I think some of it is a little bit more straightforward. I hope to continue the things that I'm doing with different collaborations. Being a freelance performer in New York City is kind of an act of balancing. You say yes to as many things as possible that you can fit on your calendar, and then throughout a day of work, you might do 4 or 5 completely different types of playing, either performing or recording. It's funny to think about. I often forget the things that I've played. To say that New York is like a fast-paced place, I think it's a really rich experience being a musician here, because you get to see everything that the musical world has to offer in some sense. It's this pipeline, like there are many pipelines in the world, and this one is particularly large. There's so many people that flow through here. You can interact with so many other parts of the world and be a part of that greater thing that we're all making together. Most recently, I played a film scoring session for, it's going to be the latest Spike Lee movie. Playing as a part of like a major motion picture has been something that I've wanted to do for quite a long time. You know, when you think about film sessions, you think of it as this big, big grand thing, and it really is in a lot of ways, but it's very tedious and very precise. Everything needs to be just so. There's a lot to think about in terms of timing. How is this going to translate into the film? Do we want to have less? Do we want to have more? And thinking about textures. So often it is about getting it right, going onto the tape, rather than doing something afterwards. Yeah, one of my favorite places to record is actually this huge ballroom that's around Penn Station, where we recorded the Spike Lee film. We also did Judas and the Black Messiah. Done a few other projects there as well. These large sort of old spaces that have their own sound characters are really few and far between in the city. When you have the opportunity to play into a large space and really hear what your instrument sounds like coming back, and then hearing that, translate into a film, it's a pretty special experience. I think my biggest goals are around working with more and more people, finding really interesting ways to connect communities. My biggest interest is to find a way to make it so that you can participate or watch or be a part of any performance anywhere. If I'm playing here, you can jump on your computer at home, for example, and we can beam you into the space and you can be a part of controlling the sounds and things that we're making for a few seconds. And then you can do that with other people, and we can create this huge mosaic of layers of people that are both in person and virtual, as we say. That goal in itself is like kind of specific and tech-based, but it's really just about finding a lot of new ways to connect. I see a lot of opportunity right now for people to engage with music. In some cases that's being taken advantage of, and then in other ways sometimes less of that. So if you think about how a classroom is, there's often a big monitor there and you have speakers and things, and how often is it that you do a math activity that's directly related to musical scales, that has you using algebra to figure out, well, if you do this chord, then what should this chord be after this? And those things are just numbers, and they create sounds, and they're really interactive. So I hope to kind of explore that space as well and see if there's some interesting ways to actually tie these different disciplines together, math and science and art, that we think of as being separate, where they rely completely on each other.